Welcome back to Faking It. I want to start off this podcast by letting you know about an exciting advancement for us. I've been away for a while, but we're back and stronger than ever, and we're launching a Patreon. For those of you who are not familiar with Patreon, it's a new crowdfunding platform. It is different from other crowdfunding platforms because it uses a month-to-month support model. So if you are a big fan, a little fan, an in-between fan of Faking It, and would like to donate, you can do so by going to our site, www.fakingitpodcast.com, and or on all of our social media, you can find links to our page there. Anything helps, seriously, $1 a month or anything. It makes a difference. I'm flying solo on this podcasting journey, and it's challenging, exhilarating, and serves as a really awesome experiment to record and chronicle people's journeys in faking it till they make it. I endeavor to bring you even more frequent episodes, and in order to do so, I need to maintain equipment, subscriptions to hosting platforms, domain names, software, marketing materials, and general time towards recording, editing, and producing every single episode on my own. When you donate, you'll get access to behind-the-scenes materials as well as early released episodes. Bottom line, I'm really enjoying making Faking It, and I hope you're enjoying listening to it. So if you can donate, please check out our site and on all of our social media to find a link to the Patreon page. If you aren't able to donate, please just pass on the word about Faking It and share it on your social media, the podcast, the Patreon page, whatever you can do. It's all really appreciated. I'm grateful for you, listener, and thanks for being you. Now, for this week, I'm so stoked to bring you this new episode with life coach Vanessa Vella. We get into life coaching as a profession, as well as what her services provide to her clients. We talk about self-love, motivation, life-changing experiences, and a whole lot more. So here we go. Okay, so welcome to the show, Vanessa. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those people who don't know you, could you just talk a little bit about what you currently are doing right now for work?
Yeah, so I am currently a life coach, and that kind of allows me to mash together a whole bunch of jobs that I've had. So I work one-on-one with people, and I help them to make changes in their life. Usually it's kind of health or happiness stuff that they want to work on. I work online, so I talk to people on Skype usually or other platforms like that. And I'm kind of like a support person for that person as they go through their own personal journey.
Great. Does that have to do largely with, do you find it's more to do with work or jobs, or is it really like specifically private life stuff that you deal with?
It's all kinds of stuff, and whatever it starts out as is not usually where we end up going. So that's kind of the fun part. I think that, everything is connected. So job stuff is personal in a way. A lot of people that have, want to transition careers, want to do it for personal reasons of some kind. And so it all just connects together, and I just ride along with the waves of what people are doing and telling me about.
Great. So your official title is life coach.
Yes, I spent a long time trying to think of a snappier title, but I feel like that sums it up, so I stuck with that.
That works. Is it something that you were educated in? Is it about, you said something to do with like various jobs you've had? So how did that all sort of come together?
Yeah, so I guess I'll answer this one in chronological order. I think that probably makes the most sense. So I worked in the fitness industry for 10 years, and I worked with people doing personal training, and I felt pretty ineffective the whole time. I was pretty good at getting people to come in and building rapport with people, but I just felt like I needed a lot more to offer people to help them actually change their lives, because teaching people how to do lunge is fine, but then they always have all this other stuff going on. And one of the jokes about being a trainer is you end up being kind of the person's therapist in a way, because they spend a lot of time with you at the gym. And so I really liked spending time with people, and I really felt like I could do more. So I started taking more courses and doing ongoing education, and I got into doing nutrition coaching through a company called Precision Nutrition, who I really love because they have the science piece, and they focus a lot on the behavior or the psychology of behavior change, rather, which really interested me. And so I just started reading about that and applying some stuff to my own life. And I took both levels of their certifications. So I have level 1 and 2 nutrition certification through them. And then I stumbled into life coaching kind of randomly, or the universe decided, depending on what perspective you have on these types of things. And I was kind of unsatisfied with work, and I knew I wanted to do more of the coaching bit, but I didn't really know how I was going to do that. And for a while, I was going to go back to university. And then as I was applying, I was like, I don't really want to go back to university. It seems like a big pain in the butt. So I was complaining to my friend one day, and I was basically saying, I want to continue working in health, but I want to get more into, the psychological part of what is holding people back and what's going on there. And I kind of want to do yoga teacher training, but I don't know if I want to do yoga teacher training. And I kind of want to take a course, but I don't want to go back to school. And I don't want to quit my job just yet. I want something I can do all that stuff while I still work. And she said, my friend Mandy has a course that has all that stuff. And I said, okay, I'll take that. And that was a life coaching certification that I took. So it was, and that I currently also now work for. So I'm now on the teaching staff for the course. And it was 6 months long, so I could work. I went once a month to Toronto, and it incorporated all the, personal growth stuff I was working on. I was in a big transition part of my life. And you receive a lot of coaching in this course, so all courses are a bit different, but I really like this one because it had a lot of yoga and mindfulness and relaxation, which I was into, and I got a lot of coaching, so I got a lot out of it personally. And at the end, I came out a certified life coach. So that was through Center for Applied Neuroscience, which is here in Toronto.
And you were commuting in to do school each week, you said?
It was one weekend a month, and I would come to Toronto from London, where I was living at the time. And all my friends, well, I shouldn't say that. I had some friends in London, but a lot of my friends were in Toronto. So I was coming down once, twice a month, often anyway. So I just started coming down for learning, and would stay with them and not really hang out with them, and then go back to London and work, and then come back to Toronto. So I did that for a while. I was a little bit of a nomad.
Oh, cool. With your schooling, basically, how did that turn into you feeling you were ready to take the next step to leave full-time work, or essentially start your own business or become a contract person? How did that pop up?
So, I mulled it over for a long time. And I guess the reason I finally took the leap is because I guess I started to realize I would never really feel ready. So I had my business. So after I finished the course, that was in 2014, and I had my business on the side for about 3 years. And it's a pretty tough go because you have your job. So, or I had my job, so I had a steady income, but I really lacked in time. I was time poor to work on my business. And so I was able to do some stuff. I was able to have a couple clients, but then it got to a point where I wasn't really able to progress past that level because I didn't have any more time to give. And I even had a flexible job. I had, when I was still working at the gym, was making my own appointments. I still had to be there for certain things, but I had much more flexibility than other people have. So, I really feel for people that are doing the side gig thing with a 9 to 5, because it's definitely a challenge. And so I guess I just, over a period of time, I just came to realize I would never have this feeling of really feeling ready. And so I should just do it. And then the universe conspired against me or for me, depending on your perspective again, where my partner had gone back to school and she was in Toronto. And when she moved, I wasn't really ready to move. And so I did another year of going back and forth between London and Toronto and working for the course and having my business and working at the gym and having my own clients. I know. I'm getting tired just thinking about it. It was crazy. It's like, have you ever been so busy you can't be tired? You're like, I'll schedule some time to be tired later.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt. It was like I did this really few months, I guess about 8 months, an academic year of doing all the things. And I had given myself this deadline. I am the sort of person that likes to gear up to things gradually. So, one of the good things about being a life coach is I get to learn a lot about different types of people and how they work. And I know that about myself. So I had some money saving goals so I could have a cushion. I had some, purging goals. I was living in a house and I went to living in an apartment. So I was getting rid of stuff. I was preparing myself in all those ways. I made sure I got a couple things done, like my website that I had been kind of working on but never finishing. And then in May of last year, I moved to Toronto and I left my job. my original plan was to transfer within the company to Toronto. And I just started to realize I just had a really strong intuition that if I did that, I would just be in exactly the same position in a cooler city.
Right.
Like, and I would still be time poor. And it would take me some time to get that new location. Even though I had the same job, it would take me a while to settle in, and it would just be taken away from my business. So I just did it. And I wish I could tell people that it felt really good and I felt really ready, but I just didn't. And I just did it anyway. And I think that's a pretty common thread you hear from people who have taken that leap, I find.
Definitely. I feel, people who, I don't know, you could really wait forever to be ready. And sometimes it's a matter of like just taking a leap and hoping and having some sort of faith that it'll work out. And it sounds like you're a really industrious person. So I think that luckily it is working out, it seems. And I wonder, as well as like an entrepreneur and somebody who's taken a lot of, I guess you've had to learn a lot too, like how to run your business. Cause it seems like, did you come from a business background, or was it sort of just like a utility of what's come up?
I will say no, but I mean, I guess I spent so many years trying to leave that job that I was really focused on what I wasn't getting out of it. But what I did get out of it was that I did learn a lot of things, like managing my time and booking people in, and strategies, to get people to come into the gym when most people don't like to work out is a great skill set to have that I think actually has a lot of crossover in a lot of different areas. And I mean, now in the course, when I teach the students, I teach them a lot of my little like tricks for remembering to follow up and how often you should poke someone who, you've lost track of and stuff. So I didn't formally come from a business background, but I really feel that I was lucky from being in a service job. Because when you provide a service, you have these ebbs and flows with the year. In December, a lot of people just bail. In the summer, people bail. So you kind of have this up and down with your business. It's not really like a salary job where, you're on an even keel. So at least I could build up a tolerance for that, because believe it or not, I'm actually a very risk averse person naturally, and not a naturally wired optimist. Like, I have kind of taught myself to think more positively using a lot of the reframing that I do in work. And I'm not the sort of person that takes big, crazy risks. So it's weird actually that I'm an entrepreneur. It's weird to me even, but I guess it's weird from the outside in, but I also find it weird. But I think those parts of me are also assets, because I, made sure I had a safety net financially. And I made sure that I had a foundation to my business. But yeah, I think one of the things that either frustrates me or I find really cool, depending on the day, is just learning a lot of these tech things. Like, I was so frustrated trying to figure out how to have two Instagram accounts, go back and forth, and how my business Instagram would link up to my Facebook. And I was like, this is so tedious. But then it's neat that I've learned all these little skills. And sometimes when I am having kind of a hard time, I try to look back and remind myself that, as you said, I am pretty industrious, and I love learning. That's actually my top strength, is love of learning. So if it's something I'm not really interested in, it's not so great. But generally, I do like to learn new things, which has served me well in this whole journey. That's for sure.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your website. Does that fall into it as well? Like, did you have to teach yourself how to do web design and all of that as well, like from scratch?
Yeah. If it wasn't for yoga and mindfulness, I don't know if I would have actually even finished my website, because so in retrospect, there's a lot of platforms now that are really easy, like user-friendly to use your website. And I definitely use one. It was not like technically hard, but, I didn't have the content created first, which is sort of like one of those golden rules of making a website. Like, you write out your bio and everything like that. And I was like, let me just do this. So it's funny, all people are kind of contradictory in different ways. And one of my things is that I'm generally pretty organized, but then sometimes I just do stuff. And, it always reinforces that I do better when I'm organized. It's like a good way of reflecting back to me that that's not really like the best way for me, but that's how I did my website anyway. And then in that process too, it brought up all that stuff about like, okay, I'm going to be on the internet. And it's funny because I think I had this fear that as soon as I launched my website, everyone would know about me. And of course, now I'm like, I wish that was true. But when I finished my website, when I finally finished it, and then after getting stuck down all these rabbit holes of like, oh, well, this font looks better than that font, and maybe I'll change the color. And then I finally was like, no, it was actually like a miniature version of my big leap. I was like, it's good enough. I like the way it is. I could work on it forever. but I'm not. I'm just going to stop and I'm going to put it out there. And the first person I showed was my roommate, John. And he's like, it looks really great. Are you going to like announce it on Facebook? And I said, no, God, no, why would I do that? And he's like, so that people can look at your website. Like, that's why you made it. And I was like, it's true. So I did that. And then, and it was funny. It was a very self-deprecating post that was like, please, please, for the love of God, tell me all the typos I have on this, because it's on the internet now and I got to fix all the typos. And I know they're there somewhere. So, fortunately, I had to have a couple of very thorough friends that told me the typos, and I fixed them. And there's probably still some there now, but hey, that's just me, so that's okay. But yeah, one day in the future, I will definitely be hiring someone to do that for me. I'm glad I've had the experience, and I'm also happy to pass it on to someone who like actually wants to be doing that.
Yeah. I think that's definitely important to. I think it's important to actually struggle through those things to learn them, just because if you really don't know what it takes, how are you supposed to really appreciate it? So like having somebody eventually take care of all those things is going to be fantastic. And it'll be even better that you'll say, oh, I'm really handing this off to somebody. I don't have to mess around with fonts and typos and all that stuff anymore.
I will super appreciate that person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'll be cool. Is there any other things that you've overcome or that you've had to like sort of learn as you go that you find are really valuable, or some things you'd suggest that like people definitely do themselves, or any struggles that you've had with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I guess, so I spend a lot of time online, sort of like in the, I guess, business community. It sounds weird saying that, but like in the online version. So I have like my online business friends that I've never met and I talk to in groups and stuff. And like, there's so much optimism in business. It's actually so weird in a way, because it's like, are you making $0? Let me show you how to make 5 figures in like 2 months or 1 month or like 3 months. And it's just so... It's not what it's like. That's just not what it's like to build a business. I mean, not every business is different. And so I'm in a service where I really need to connect with people one-on-one, whether it's online or in person. It's one of those things. It's not like everyone's out there looking for a life coach. If I was selling like unicorn mugs, then it would be different, because unicorns are very popular right now and I could probably sell a bunch of them at once. But if I was the potter and I was making them, that would be different. So it's just, every business is different, but it definitely takes a while. And I think that it's very tempting to say, in 6 months, I'm going to get up and running, because it is a long haul motivation. And so it's tempting to be overly ambitious with your goals. And so I think that was one of the things that I fell into once I took the leap, maybe as a way of like countering, the totally normal and inherent fear that goes along with leaving my job. I mean, that was the first time I didn't have a job in like, I don't know, over a decade, like 15 years maybe. And the first 3 months I was only working on my business, my parents kept asking me if I was going to get employment insurance. And I was like, but I have a business. It's not like I'm not doing anything. But it was so weird. It felt like I wasn't doing anything. So I think the, like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year kind of perspective is very apt in business. And I remember having 2 particular conversations that really helped me with this. And one was with Paul, actually, who you interviewed on your podcast before.
Mm-hmm. And Paul Lucas, yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, so like this is the first year, of your business now that you like it's just you and your business. And I was like, oh yeah, because in my mind I was like, this is the 4th damn year I've been doing this, but it wasn't, right? Like it was, I had that period of time, but it wasn't the same because I was working. And so, if I didn't get a client, I was like, it's fine. And I wasn't really as driven as I was. So it kind of mentally helped me set the clock over and reminded me, like, if I can get through this 1 year and like just still be, I was going to say alive, but that's over dramatic, like business alive, like still have my business, or, mentally, emotionally alive too, then it'll be fine. And then, another conversation I had that helped me was with the business coach, where I was really in a funk because I had been in this, phase of time. I think everyone's had this experience where I was doing the work every day and I was working really hard, but I didn't have anything tangible to show for it yet. And even though I believed that I would have something tangible, it was just like something would be great, just anything. So it's like, as you were saying, having the faith, it's not always easy. And my cushion, my financial safety net was getting smaller, and I was just in a really grumpy mood. And basically this business coach that I know was like, if you really need to take a day to be really grumpy and say everything about this sucks and is the worst, that's fine. But what you do tomorrow is really going to determine whether or not you can stay in business. Because if this goes on and these moments are going to affect you, then you're probably going to find it really hard to continue over the long haul. And I remember at the end of that day, I can't remember what I did, but I did like 5 small, really productive, good things that made me feel like I was moving forward. And no one had prompted me to, and I just like got myself back together, and it was good. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And so it's almost been a year since I moved, and so I'm still alive, which is good. But I think you have to take the long-term perspective. It's not
right. And
so easy as making 5 figures in 2 months to 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a bit extreme. I mean, it'd be great. That'd be great.
It's full of that stuff, like full.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's really like a weird narrative. Like, it's like this magical, like, if you talk to me and only me, I will fix everything for your business and it'll be fantastic. It's really creepy, actually, to be honest, I find.
Yeah, there's a lot of scams out there for every single single thing you do. If you're in a certain area, you will find scams. I'm wondering as well, like, what the change between starting, or you said did you have clients in London or in a smaller place for life coaching, or was that specifically just physical training?
Both. So I had training clients and I had life coaching clients. So when I started my business, I did make the decision to work online so that I could one day, be nomadic and travel the world or go live in Costa Rica or something. And I wouldn't have to worry about the logistics of getting around places, because travel time is a time expense that I actually didn't want to have. And I wanted to be at home or somewhere else. Right. I like being at home. So I had some online clients and I had some in-person clients. So some of my coaching clients to start with were people that I had done personal training with that I coached. Part of the program is that we do practicum coaching sessions. You have to wrangle up 5 guinea pigs, to practice on in exchange for feedback. So what was cool about making the choice to work online is that one of my guinea pigs was a lady that I used to work with at the gym who had moved to Hong Kong to be a teacher. And so she was like having that bit of culture shock and living in Hong Kong and stuff. And I did life coaching with her, and it was just so cool. In addition to being somewhat challenging to schedule, I would not have been able to coach her if, I was doing it in person. So, and then we would do things like Center for Applied Neuroscience does events like this past weekend. We were at the yoga show. And so because I didn't have a ton of time, I would go to the event for like a day and I would talk to people and I would do sample like mini coaching sessions. I still do that. I just did a whole bunch of them this weekend, and I would draw someone for 2 sessions. And so my thinking at first was that I did a lot for either reduced rate or I did like some free coaching because I just wanted to practice. I thought to myself, I know me, and if I take this leap and I'm already going to be freaked out by the business side of it, I don't want to have any, really big doubts about my coaching skills. Like I want to feel really good about that part of my business, about the service I provide. And so that was what I did for the first couple of years of my business. I had like a few clients, but I really felt like I was honing my skills. And fortunately, the job I had allowed me to hone my skills as well. So I was able to communicate better with people at gym, or I was able to help them reframe, thoughts. Like I started really noticing how people were like really self-critical when they were working out. And so I would stop and I would help them think, differently about how they were talking to themselves or what they were thinking about and that sort of thing. So I was fortunate I was able to blend it all together to an extent.
Right. Yeah. And do you find in sort of like the theme of I find it interesting that you were moving on, you were kind of starting to like remodel your life and design it a little differently as you started doing life coaching as like education, then taking people on. How does it feel being educated as such and then basically being in the position to give advice to people? Did you feel like when you said you want to feel ready that you can actually do it, the only way it seemed that you really could is like you surpassed the guinea pig stage, but did you feel like you at a certain point you weren't 100% on what you were doing, or did you feel like you were faking it a little bit to get the results you wanted to because you hadn't done it so much. Like, I wonder how that would be just out of the gate, like coming out of it and having to give somebody advice for the first time as an official life coach. What was that like the first one after education?
There's two parts to that answer. And I mean, the short part is sometimes I always tell the students, I can think of lots of times where I've been in a session and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on right now. And that's fine because, the kind of more philosophical answer to that is I really don't feel like I give advice. And I think this is a really important distinction between coaching and consulting, I suppose, or coaching and therapy even, is that if I don't know about the person's topic and I don't know what steps they should take, that's actually okay. And I think this is really, really freeing. A really freeing part of life coaching is my job is not to help that person directly necessarily. My job is to help them help themselves by guiding them towards what they need to do for themselves. So, in that sense, life coaching is not for everyone, because if you need very directive, a directive modality, then you might need something like therapy, or a consultant would be someone who would know specifically about your industry, if it's your job or whatever. And also people who do the best in life coaching tend to be very introspective. So I ask a lot of questions that get people thinking differently. And then I might bounce around a couple ideas, but I would also ask them for ideas. And then we would end the session with me saying, what do you think, you should move forward with? And then I might say something like, that seems like a really big step. Can we pare it down or something? So I think I'm kind of lucky as a life coach in the sense that if I don't know what the person should do, that's actually okay. But I do need to have some input. I think, the sort of traditional version of the therapist that goes, and how does that make you feel, and never offers everything is not what I do either. Right. And so I think I've come to realize that those experiences where I have felt really uncomfortable or not prepared have been really helpful in either helping me realize that some things trigger me. So maybe the client is really like me, or they're going through, a really big breakup, and I also just went through that, or I'm going through that. That can be kind of hard, and it's good to know what your threshold is for that type of stuff. And also to be in situations where, I really didn't know what to do or say, and being able to be honest and talk about it, which is also something that maybe a therapist wouldn't be able to do, is sometimes I would say, this is really intense. I don't really know what to say about that, and I think I'm able to be honest like that and to share my own experiences as well with clients, which is not necessarily the case for other people. And getting through those experiences is really probably the only way I can think of not having that sense of imposter syndrome, or that I don't have a place here. But personally, I think that the best coaches are people that have gone through some stuff themselves. And so I think what happens with imposter syndrome in particular is people think, well, how could I, for example, advise someone on how to have a healthy relationship when I just had my relationship end or something, right? But I think that actually gives you experience and perspective and empathy and compassion for what the other person is going through. I have 3 herniated discs in my back, and I've had times where I can't stand or walk. And I think while I wouldn't, if I had the opportunity to not have herniated discs, I probably would take it. It really did enhance my work as a trainer, because I really did understand what it felt like for someone to be in pain and not be able to sleep, or feel be afraid to balance or something. Because I had been through those experiences myself, and I worked with a lot of people in the fitness industry that were people that were fit their whole lives and played sports, and things came very easily to them kinesthetically. And so sometimes they would have a harder time connecting with their clients for that reason.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of an asset to have a normal, weird, crazy life like everyone else.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of helping you practice your compassion and your ability to understand people. That makes total sense, right? You wouldn't want somebody who claims to have the most perfect life coaching you, because maybe you do want a perfect life, but people know that stuff doesn't exist, and you'd rather some people who actually had some scars and wounds and, have been through stuff, I think.
Yes. Very suspicious, the people that have everything going right for them all the time.
Yeah, quite suspicious. Do you find in life coaching, when doing life coaching in a bigger city like Toronto, is it easier to meet people who need it? Do you find like a difference between like your client base? I know you're saying you're working with people via Skype, so it's really anywhere, but like the types of clients you've attracted in Toronto, what does that look like in comparison to like somewhere like London?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference. I think that it's probably generally true in bigger cities that people will invest more in themselves. And I think that because there's such a diversity of people in Toronto, people tend to be a lot more open about sharing, I don't know, stories about their mental health. And I mean, it's so interesting when we go to events because we're in the middle of this super loud, crazy, like exhibitor area. Like it's not good. It's not a good place to do life coaching. It's like very not that private. It's very loud and stimulating. And people are just so open and share so much. And I think that I'm going to try to be careful not to get into just complaining about London because it's not my favorite place. But I felt like I spent a lot of time explaining like why people would need a life coach. And I think in Toronto, the difference is to maybe just clarify what life coaching is. So for example, that clarification between the idea that I don't actually tell people what to do or give them advice, but I rather help them figure things out. But people are more curious about different things. I mean, food is a good analogy. Like look at all the crazy different foods you can get in Toronto, you know, like people go into restaurants, they're like, I don't know what any of this is. I don't know how to pronounce it. Bring me the food. Like people are just very curious about other things, I find. Yeah.
What kinds of people come to life coaching predominantly, or do you have such a mix of people who are looking, like what are your demographics like?
Yeah. So, it is definitely a mix, but I mean, I think, you know, one of the things about humanity as general is people tend to have a lot of things in common. So I think that, if I were to say some of the most common themes that I deal with talking to people is it's, you know, mindfulness is a big one. And I know mindfulness is a buzzword, but basically the ability to focus on what you're doing, to be here now, and dealing with the opposite of that, which is like ruminating about the past or worrying about the future. You know, runaway thoughts and stuff like that is something that I feel like all my clients deal with in different ways. And then self-compassion or self-love, whatever you want to call it, is a big one. So the way you talk to yourself, I think this is really like one of my favorite topics because I never have met anyone that can't do with a little, you know, more kindness in how they talk to themselves. Yeah, and it's huge, and it applies to you whether you're like exercising or you're starting a new job or you just anything, like you make a mistake, like that's very important. And then health and wellness, like generally. So I'm a very practical coach. So insofar as I like to share a lot of like, you know, tips and tools and hacks with people, I really think people make their lives harder unnecessarily.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's this kind of narrative around like, if you're going to work to change something, you got to be working really hard. Like maybe it's like the remnants of like the whole Protestant work ethic, but sometimes I'm like, that is really hard. Like this could be a much easier way of doing that. And so that's a lot of how I weave in like my nutrition coaching and my yoga stuff, or things that relate to that too are like time management and productivity. So I learned really early on at the gym that people who do well with exercise and nutrition aren't more motivated, or they don't have more willpower or self-control than anyone else. They have more of a resolve, I suppose, but like to follow through, like maybe they have a more of an emotional salience for their goal, but most of the time it's like organization and time management and setting yourself up for success and just being proactive. You know, like if you get home from work and you skipped breakfast and had a small lunch and had a really stressful staff meeting, you will eat a whole pizza. Like that is something that's completely reasonable. At that point, you are hungry, you're angry, like stuff has happened.
This is an equation, I guess, that like you've worked out. Like this plus this equals whole pizza.
Yeah, like, or maybe it's not a pizza, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how people can expect themselves to like rise to the occasion, like in those circumstances. So,
does that come from self-love though, do you feel, Vanessa? Like that also, if people don't give themselves like the time to actually like nurture and take care of themselves, like are people maybe struggling with like what needs to be finished as opposed to like, okay, am I going to really do this task great if I don't sit and like take a minute to drink some water?
Yeah, and it has to do with like so many things, like emotional triggers and stuff. Like I can think of this time I was really upset with someone, and I had convinced myself that confronting them about it, like whether that confrontation was going to be like civil or whatever, but like even just saying anything about it, like after a cooling off period or whatever, was not going to be fruitful. And so I was kind of stewing about it, and I decided to like have a bath and just relax and forget about it and be in a good mood, which sounds like self-care and sounds like mindfulness, but it's actually just pushing away what's really happening. And so I ended up just making like from scratch peanut butter cookies. And so like, I'm not talking about like I opened a bag, like I preheated the oven, I mixed up the stuff, I made the cookies, I let them rest, and then I was like, I'm just going to eat like a few of these. Like what it was, so anyway, I ate all the cookies. And then I felt awful and I had the stomach ache, and I was like, I can see so clearly how this happened. Like I can go back to like this whole day and like how I got so annoyed and I didn't vent my steam. Like I didn't purge so like anger or whatever is a high arousal, emotional state, nervous system state. And so what I did was I was like, I'm just going to get myself to a really low Zen state. I'm a yoga teacher, and so I'm fine. I'm just going to be in the bath. And that doesn't work.
It's like, what does work in that situation? Is there a way maybe that like that could have been handled better?
Oh yeah. So if you have like, a lot of high energy stuff, it could be like exercising might work, like going for a run might work. You know what I mean? Even just putting on some music and like dancing around, or like, it depends on the person and their personality. So I do like to talk things out. I find that helps me diffuse stuff. However, anger is one of those emotions that sometimes people do worse talking it out. So this is why it's important to sort of know yourself and know what works for you. Because sometimes as you discuss it, things like get bigger or get more intense. So, but at the end of the day, the thing I avoided doing was talking to this person. And that actually probably would have been the most productive thing, because the reason I chose not to talk to them, because I thought nothing will happen. I won't get the satisfaction I want out of it. And if I had reframed my expectation by saying, I have the right to say that I'm annoyed because I was genuinely annoyed, and it's not like I have the right to be mean to them necessarily, but whether or not they respond favorably to what I say, I think I would have actually, that is the thing that would have made me feel the best. And it was just like, it was the hardest thing, so I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, so path of least resistance.
What I did instead. Yeah. But the self-love piece comes in because I actually, I remember sitting there and being like, I feel terrible. And then I couldn't eat my very delicious and nutritious dinner I prepared because I literally was like full of peanut butter and sugar. And I was like, it's done. There's nothing to do about it now. And so, I drank a lot of water, had some herbal tea. I let it go. Right. And then the next day I remember going to the gym of all places and telling one of my personal training clients the story. And I think if you poll people who work in the fitness industry, they would advise against that sort of thing. And my client looked at me and said, I love you right now. And it was because
you're relating.
Yeah. And certain industries like self-help, milieux like this, but fitness and health is really like this. Like everyone, whether they put themselves up on a pedestal or other people do it for them, people don't like to break that spell. And
right.
I really don't agree with that personally. Like, I think it's really important that everyone understands that, everybody is real and everyone can relate to that stuff. And also that if you eat a bunch of cookies, it doesn't, maybe there's something that happened that you could do differently that has nothing to do with those cookies, right? So they've done really interesting, I always refer to the, royal they as like researchers. Researchers have done a lot of interesting stuff with self-control. Is it finite? Does it run out? How do we make it stronger? And where does it fail us? And so that story about the cookies, without going into all that research, is basically a good demonstration of how self-control can totally crap out on you at a certain point in time after a series of events where you are holding something in and using your self-control for things that don't matter.
Do you come to a place at all with your clients where is there a moment where you might see that it would be good to consider medical professional help? So I'd imagine you come across quite a few people who might be struggling with some mental health issues, or maybe they don't know that they are yet. Is there something that you kind of have to, tread lightly with? How might that be dealt with?
carefully. And I guess the thing with life coaching is all coaches are different. So I'm comfortable with dealing with fitness and nutrition stuff before I refer out, but definitely. So I think when someone needs therapy is when they need a more directive intervention, or they need a diagnosis. If a client was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, I can't self-regulate my emotions. They probably wouldn't say that because that's psychology talk. My mood's all over the place. So,
Yeah.
And I don't know what's wrong and so forth, and I'm really worried and it's very intense, then that would, be a reason to refer out to someone. I've referred my clients to naturopaths at times and stuff like that, or different like body work modalities. I think life coaching is one of those things that does well as a combination of other stuff. So, like I had a client recently who's going through gastrointestinal stuff, and we had kind of done some mindfulness, self-awareness work with eating, like how do you feel when you eat this and eat that, and adjusted some stuff, and it was still going on. And so I was like, I think the conversation is something like, based on what you told me, I think that you need this other kind of person in your life. And ideally they're like, I'm totally open to doing that and I will do it immediately. But obviously I am very fortunate. I've never been in a situation where I've had to say to someone, I can't work with you anymore. But it's definitely something that could happen. And it's tough. It's tough because it's a tough conversation if that were to happen. And it's also tough because when you're in business, there's this struggle sometimes with wanting to take people on or wanting to keep people, even though it's not necessarily right. And it might not even be a really serious issue. I talked to a really interesting dude this past weekend who was saying he worked with a life coach. He didn't really get him what he was looking for, and he was looking for another life coach. And then when he described to me what he really wanted someone to tell him exactly what to do for his career path. And I, at the beginning, I was really excited. I was like, I'm a life coach and I like this guy. He's cool. He could be my client. This is awesome. And it ended with me saying, I really don't think that life coaching is what you need. And it's really too bad that, because he had been that clear with the previous person and they took him on anyway. And he said he got some value out of it, which is great, because I think you always get some value out of investing in yourself, but he didn't get what he was really looking for. And so that's really like not a great way to send someone off, into the world in terms of your reputation or our reputation.
Right.
Yeah. So even that wasn't like a very serious issue, but, I guess you have to have integrity is the short answer, right? You have to be able to say, like, have the tough conversations if they're tough, or just have the honest conversations if that's not something you're willing to do. Or my particular niche, right? Like I have realized over time that I really like working with people one-on-one. I've worked with people in 2s and 3s, and I don't like it as much. I like working with, for lack of a better term, grown-ups. I mean, I had a friend recently that was like, my friend's teenage kid is going through this. And I was like, you know what? I will help you find someone. But that's not really my jam. And I think we'd both be a little grumpy because it's not my best.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think a lot of the time too, if you're looking for support or advice, people have to try out different things. It's never going to just fit exactly the way you want it to. And sometimes you have to learn different things about who's coaching you, I think. It's also the same way, like physically, if you're on a sports team, sometimes the theory or the way that like a coach might go at, the way they play the game is different than the way that you like to. And it's not always a great fit. So yeah. And I can see it would be really difficult to like want to take on more clients, but be like, this person's not good for me.
Yeah, it is a tough call for sure. And I think you make a really good point, which is that it's not always apparent that either from the coach's point of view or the client that you're getting really something out of it immediately, because a lot of what happens in life coaching is between the sessions. And so,
right.
Like, for example, I don't actually, sign people up for single sessions. I do minimum of 3 because it's the continuity between the sessions that actually is the life coaching. And so you might finish a session and feel kind of like fuzzy about things, or feel, I was really overwhelmed and I'm less overwhelmed, but I don't really feel that good. But then it's after it percolates, and what you're doing, your action steps in between. So, I mean, this is not something every coach does, but I pretty much end every session with 1 or 2 things the person's going to go off and do on their own. And so the point of that, and the point of having time between the sessions, is that they can have reflections and ideas. And sometimes their idea is that step we thought was a really good idea didn't work at all. And that has value, because knowing what doesn't work is just as good as knowing what works. And it does take some time to get there. And I've certainly been on the other side of coaching too. And I've worked with a therapist too, where I've had times where I'm like, this is dumb, nothing's working, I totally want to quit. And I think it's really important to recognize that wanting to quit is either directly that you want to quit because you don't like it, or it's also like things are getting too real, so it feels easier to quit, or, things are going in a different direction than you want, and it doesn't seem to make sense. And so there's like a lot of stuff that can go into not liking something, and it doesn't mean it's not a good experience. So it's a little tricky.
Yeah. And I think people definitely mistake being uncomfortable as like needing to quit. But I think being uncomfortable is the key to changing something.
Yeah.
So you've described a couple of areas that are niches for you. So fitness and nutrition are a big one for life coaching. But like, what's a person coming to you for life coaching? What's the ideal person? Like, what does the ideal person look like?
Yeah. So, I think my ideal person is someone who is introspective. They think about how they think. And they don't have to know everything. They don't have to figure it out, but it's like getting to know themselves better and figuring out some stuff in their life, whatever that stuff is. I mean, I do work a lot in those areas, and I also work with people who want to be writers, and, like it's all kinds of different stuff. But
so you feel most comfortable in nutrition and fitness, but like it expands throughout whatever. Like somebody wanted some coaching for you for their career, they could come to you, or if it's just like personal issues, like it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, I like doing all kinds of stuff, and I don't feel like I feel more comfortable with health and exercise stuff, but I feel like it always just comes in. It always comes in because it's like, it's important to most people.
Yeah, absolutely.
To some level, right? So even if it's not the starting point, it always comes in. But yeah, like I feel like I do pretty well coaching people to, be more positive, to be more productive, manage their time and stuff like that. So I think that, again, my ideal person is someone who has some goals in mind. Maybe they have a lot of goals. I tend to, talk to people that are like, I have so many goals, I don't know which ones to work on first or how to go about them. And so, I think something I had a sort of an aha moment about recently is that, and this is also one of the differences between coaching and therapy in a way, is I want to work with people who, they would probably say my life's pretty good. Like, I'm pretty satisfied with things, but I want to strive for a more meaningful life, or I want to discover how to be more purposeful in my actions, or discover my life purpose, or go after my passion, but be realistic about it, or balance those different things. And so it's not necessarily an issue of never being satisfied or always wanting more, but wanting more meaning, like wanting more meaningful stuff. So having more time for self-care, or having more time for family, or like the work-life balance thing, or using my strengths, or making a difference in the world, and that sort of self-actualization type stuff. If that harkens back to intro to psychology for anyone, like the hierarchy of needs, like becoming a self-actualized person and the higher level stuff. But I think this is the reason that food and movement always comes into it, because security and safety and taking care of your basic needs, like sleeping and eating food and stuff, that's the bottom of that's the foundation of that whole hierarchy, right? So it's really hard to have a more meaningful life if you're really like borderline malnourished and stuff like that, or you're really sleep deprived. So yeah.
Great. And what, for people who might be interested in doing sessions with you, what would a session look like? What does that kind of entail?
Yeah. So it's an hour long, and we start by like checking in with how things are going. And I have this policy that if I say, how's it going? And then you tell me all the things that are going badly, then I make you say some things that are going well, and I'll wait until you say it, because that's, sometimes I'm like, how's your day? And they're like, I did not do my homework. I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. So we just do like a general, how are things going? I'll be like, you sound really frustrated about that. That's cool. I totally get that. And so assuming that we've had a previous session, then that's what we would do. We would kind of debrief what's been happening, what's been going on. Have things been going well? Have you tweaked things or whatever? I love getting emails from people that are just, I got a really great, honest one from a client the other day that was like, yeah, so I did this, I did that, but the other thing we talked about, I thought about it after, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I didn't. And it was like, cool. So, we talk about that, and then they say, what do you want to talk about in today's session? So sometimes it's kind of linear, like a continuation of like the main goal they're working on. But oftentimes things change a bit because maybe, I don't know, they're covering someone's job at work, or like something has changed in the last couple of weeks. And so we talk about that. What is the next step, whether it goes along with the last thing or whether it's a new thing. I have one client where every session is like a new surprise. It's always like some new kind of thing. If it's fun, it keeps my toes for sure. I always have a plan, and within about 8 seconds, I'm like, no, that's not going to be the plan. And so then we do a bit of brainstorming about what the next step could be. So we do that together. And if they're like, I don't know what to do, I might say, well, what about this or what about that? And, they might say, oh, that's not going to work for me. I've tried that, or maybe I'll try it. Or we might pick something that's like, we were talking about, uncomfortable. And we would say, let's just do it as an experiment. And then we try to get that into a concrete action step towards the end of the session so that they can go off and they have a clear idea of what they're doing. Whenever I collect feedback from people, the feedback I get from them is usually that at the end of the session, they feel very clear about what they're doing. They feel motivated. They feel confident in what they're doing. That's really important to me. And then it's really, really easy to forget about doing that thing. So one of the things I do as a coach is I always follow up with people between sessions. I email them. I say, how's it going? I don't operate on no news is good news. I think no news is usually not great news. So I like to get updates. And even if the update is I haven't done it yet or whatever, I provide that accountability between sessions. And on average, I see people every 2 weeks. I have seen a client like 3 or 4 times in a week for a couple of weeks, and I have seen people every week or less often, but that's probably the average. And the work is going on in between when we're meeting, and I'm staying in contact with them to make sure that they stay on track. So that's kind of it in a general overview. Obviously, it's different sometimes with people that are, overcommitters and overextend themselves with things. Sometimes the homework is not to do any more things, just to do the things they're already doing. But sometimes,
do less.
Yeah, or do less. What can you blow off? So. Yeah, just blow it off. That's actually one of my favorite self-care things that I do to myself sometimes. It's true. Sometimes I'll be like, all right, real talk, how important is each one of these things? Is there something I can just blow off? It's very freeing. I mean, you can't use blow it off to weasel out of something you need to be doing, or blow off Thanksgiving because you don't like your racist uncle. But I mean, sometimes I might think, I'm going to just spruce up my website, and I have a week that's really jam-packed like this week is, and I have this talk with myself, like, what are you doing? Blow that off. So.
Right. So you can kind of go on a sliding scale of what's okay and what's not.
Yeah, and scales and continuums are such a huge part of coaching, I find, because people are really good at black and white thinking about things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's one of those reframing perspective shifting things that makes me useful, right? It's not like, I think you should think about it like this. It's like, I notice that you either do this all the time or you don't do it. What if there was something in between those two things that you could do? Yeah.
So you've mentioned reframing a couple of times, and a few different terminologies that I think are common that you're talking about, and I think are very helpful maybe to our listeners who are interested in getting into some of this, either as a life coach or somebody who wants to use your services. So what would you say things like reframing might afford people, and what kinds of positive things that you work into it, and or positivity you've seen from your clients that people could look forward to?
Yeah, so I I think there's a lot of different applications of that. I mean, one pretty straightforward application is frequently recurring negative thoughts someone has about themselves. So we've talked about people who are, let's say, in a career transition or something like that, who say, I'm never going to find a job I like. And the problem with those thoughts is they're so insidious. And sometimes, and this is where mindfulness is important, because I find that often, and I've been through this experience myself too, is that it's even hard to become aware of how often that pops up. And yeah. And what I think about reframing that's really important is again, you can find a lot of like really big, shiny optimism if you start like reading up on this. And optimism is great, but you can't just do a 180 from your inner monologue, right? Like if you're negative about a certain topic and then you change that to tomorrow I will find the dream job that suits me the best and pays me all the money.
Not realistic.
This is kind of like the drawback of positive affirmations when they're so big like that. Because the neuroscience piece is that if you don't believe what you're trying to say to yourself, you will not stick to repeating that thing. So again, with stages or scales or continuums, reframing is a really good example of, the first more positive reframe of that might be, I'm going to apply to all the jobs I think will suit me, and I'll just take it from there. I'm not going to get some of them, and I might get one, right? It's just like opening the possibilities up. So it could be something like that. I remember one time, this is why I think personal experience is important, is one of my patterns for a long, long time was to say, I'm so stupid every time I made a mistake. I'm so stupid. And I would even say it out loud sometimes, like jokingly, or like I'd say, I'm so stupid. And so I set about trying to change that, and it took a while. So there was a long period of time where I'd think, I'm so stupid. And then I would like hear the gears trying to turn the other way. And I'd be like, no, wait, that was stupid, but I'm okay. And it was very like clunky. And, and one of my many, many trips to Toronto, I was actually, the funny thing about the story is I was gloating about how good I was getting at packing really quickly and not forgetting anything and like going back and forth. And I immediately realized I'd forgotten my keys to our apartment, or my partner's apartment at the time. And she had a cold, and I had advised her. So this is the thing. Even though I don't advise my clients, I still do it all the time with my friends and family. Can't stop. So I was like, listen, take all the drowsiest cold medicine and just go right to bed, extra strength nighttime neocitrin. So like I was phoning her. I think I called her 50 times. And anyway, I couldn't get in. But I remember this moment so clearly. It's like this hallelujah moment, because that was a really stupid thing to do. And it accurately was stupid. Like not having my keys was kind of dumb. And the first thing I thought was, that was so stupid. And then I stopped and was like, oh my God, I didn't think I was so stupid. I didn't beat myself up and say, you idiot. Right. Like, how could you do that? Like you're so stupid. Because what that does is it draws in your identity. So I'm a very organized and prepared person. So if I forget my keys, then am I organized and prepared? I must suck, because I'm not being that person who I am. Right. And I really actually felt the shift in my thinking, in my brain, the way I was processing stuff, because when we're stressed and negative with ourselves, we can't be creative. So that's like a system in our brain, or a way of thinking, that's really impaired. Problem solving, creative thinking is really impaired when we're stressed and negative. And so I immediately got actually really happy, because then I was like really proud of myself for realizing I made this change. And I did all this I sat down, I took a break, I had a little mindful moment, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm safe. I have snacks. It's very important. I don't want to do without food. I have friends in the city. I started texting people and saying, if I can't get a hold of her, like, can I stay with you? And I actually felt a lot of gratitude. And so it was like this really long journey for me, because I didn't even know how negative my self-talk was for a long time. And so I think the way I would use that, in coaching is, it's the awareness part, and it's the consistent repeated action. And it's also like the stages of reframing. So the final reframe for me in that situation was that actually doing that stupid thing was really positive for me, because I would never have experienced that like really clear moment of how I had shifted if I hadn't forgotten my stupid keys. And, and I didn't beat myself up about it, which was great. And I could think of a bunch of different examples with reframing. I mean, I've done activities where I actually have people write out reframed versions of things, or create not a positive affirmation, but like a pretty good, affirmation, like something that they believe in, but is a more positive version of what they're thinking about. Or a really common and practical way to reframe is how you think about failure.
Right.
What did I get out of this experience? What did I learn? Or for me, for example, if I meet someone who I think would be a really good client for me and it doesn't work out, I can say, well, maybe it wasn't the right time for them, or maybe it wasn't the right fit between the two of us, instead of saying, well, what's wrong with me and why didn't I do a better job in making that person know that they should definitely hire me as a life coach, because that's not really a reasonable expectation to have of myself either, right? So it's a huge, huge area for a lot of people.
I really like this. I don't know if there is something that you do that's similar, but there was a mindfulness technique sort of that a friend passed off to me who was feeling like he was having a lot of negative thoughts, and he put a hair elastic around his wrist. Mm-hmm. And then every time he came across sort of like he thought he was being negative towards himself or towards other people, he would just physically take the elastic off his wrist and put it on his other wrist.
Yeah.
So he would continuously do something physical to remind himself that, that's a really negative thought. And I actually really felt that helped me, because I would be personally at the gym doing something and like thinking this one thing, or like really getting down on myself at a time that I was trying to take care of myself. So like even the time that I'd allotted to be like, okay, I'm going to think positively here, and this is a good thing I should be doing, I was like beating myself up about it. So I actually felt like it really helped to have a physical sort of affirmation of moving this elastic back and forth to remind myself, like, don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So it's bringing you back into the present moment and out of that loop of thinking.
Yeah.
And I was really worried at first you were going to say he was going to snap himself with the elastic as some kind of punishment for thinking a negative thought.
No.
And I was like, I hope that's not it.
No. It was just a physical change from one wrist to the other.
Exactly. So moving is actually a really good way of doing that. And in one of the coaching programs I was taking, I was really overwhelmed one day, and I just wrote this like verbal diarrhea message to my coach. And I was like, listen, this is what's going on with me. And well, anyway, that's what it is. I'm going to work now. And she had actually said, and it's really interesting, just to stand up and just like shake around, like just shake your arms and legs and just do like an Elaine dance from Seinfeld, like little kids, you know what I mean? Because even if you challenge yourself, even if you said, you know what, I'm going to think really hard about that negative thought, I'm going to keep thinking about it while I do this, you actually can't, because you're thinking about moving, right? Or even that small movement that you described. So those are really good. Distraction techniques are a great way to deal with like, food cravings that are not hunger related, anger, like you're going to write that angry email, set a timer for 5 minutes, and then just see
and then
how you feel better after. Yeah, just reevaluate, and any kind of distraction technique is a really good like immediate interference in that kind of thought pattern. And then the bigger picture is like beyond those moments, then how do I retrain myself to think differently? So what happens with our recurring thoughts is kind of like when people walk a path through a field, and they walk the path and they make a groove, right? And so you can choose at any point in time to go in any other direction, but you have to walk that same path many, many, many times before you make that groove. Mm-hmm. And understanding that about ourselves is actually, I think, really freeing when it comes to and really affirming when it comes to self-compassion, because it's like, it's not going to change overnight. It's going to take time. And I always tell my clients that when you're in that awareness space where you can watch yourself doing the thing you don't want to be doing, and you're like, look at this, I'm still doing that thing. That's the thing I don't want to be doing. That's still awareness. There was a point in your life where you were doing that thing and you weren't aware of it. You just did it anyway.
Right.
So it's still moving in the right direction. And then little by little, there'll be times where you're watching yourself and you can change that thing around, or you try, you don't quite get there, or then you try and you actually do it. So change takes time. People actually consistently underestimate the amount of time it takes to do things. And this has been studied. It's called planning fallacy. It happens with deadlines, construction projects, like goals. I did it with my business. So people knowing that your brain will consistently screw you over when it comes to estimating the timeline on anything is actually a really good thing to know about your brain. Just don't trust any initial timeline that you come up with. It'll only take 10 minutes to drive there. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I can think of at least a few people in my life that could use a little bit more of training in that area.
Yeah, less planning fallacy.
Yeah, exactly.
More planning.
Yeah. So on your social media and on your Facebook, on your social media and your website, you offer some tips and stuff like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about where people can find you and sort of what you offer through your website and your social media?
Absolutely. That would be great. So, I have a private group on Facebook for members only to come and meet like-minded people to meet and discuss things. And I post every day in there. It's called Habit Hacks, Attitude Adjustments, and Self-Talk Switch-Ups, because those are most of the things I share with people. So it's how to change your habits, changing your attitude towards things like reframing, and then self-talk, as we talked about. And I also have an Instagram account where I post a lot of similar stuff on there. On my website, there's a place you can go and actually sign up for a free 30-minute online coaching session. So the point of that is that, life coaching is one of those things you can talk about, and I appreciate everyone listening to me ramble on about it, but it's way, way, way better to actually do some of it. And so my promise for that is the very minimum thing that will happen is we'll have a lovely chat. You'll get one action step to move you along. So if you feel stuck or you feel confused about what direction to go in, you're going to get one little action step, just like you would in a full session. And then if you, sadly, we never speak to each other again, you'll still have that thing you can work on. And if from there you realize, hey, this is actually something that really helped me move forward and I could use a lot more of that, then we can talk about working together. But even if someone has decided 100% to work with me, I will still have that appointment with them, because that's how I learn about them, learn about their goals, learn about how they talk about stuff, and that's our first little jumping off point to working together or not.
Right. And on social media, how do people actually find you, or your website? What's your URLs?
So my website is vanessavellacoaching.com. It's all just one big long word. So you can search the group in groups, Habit Hacks, Attitude Adjustments, and Self-Talk Switch-Ups. I also have a business page. My business page's name conveniently is also Vanessa Vella Coaching. And from there you can link into the group and so on. And my Instagram account name is Vanessa Vella Coaching. So
we got all of those things.
Yeah. So I tried to make it easy for myself to remember what my user names are, but also it's easy to find me.
It's really just for you. Yeah. It's not for anybody else.
It's too many passwords. Too many passwords to remember.
Seriously.
I can't be remembering all the different usernames too.
So what we'll do for you guys, audience, we will include links to all of Vanessa's social media and website in our the episode notes of this episode. So you'll be able to find that on our website. So thanks so much, Vanessa, for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I think we'll probably have a lot of people out there interested in your services.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. It was really nice talking to you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about myself and what I do, because not everyone likes to listen to me do that.
Well, it was lovely. Thanks so much for coming on.
Okay, thank you.
A big thanks to Vanessa for coming on the podcast. If you're interested in Vanessa's life coaching services, you can head on over to our site and check out the show notes for this episode number 18 with life coach Vanessa Vella. I will link all of her contact information there. So head over to fakingitpodcast.com for show notes and info on how to support Faking It through Patreon. Until next time, you fakers.